alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to a live after reading. And I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a returning guest, IQ Malcolm. Welcome back to the show, Ian.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim.
It's always good to have you on the show, and I forget actually when we last had John. What time is dilated? No, not supposed to say that. I know I get punched in the face if I say that, and that's only partially a joke. No, but time is weird, especially when it involves a podcast. So. So you've been writing and doing all the other things you do. Being swamped by all the things in your life, from my understanding. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, because I'm doing a terrible job of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all good, Tim. So yes, my name is IQ Malcolm. I am a writer of psychological thrillers and middle grade fantasy. As Tim was alluding to my schedule, I am a substitute teacher. I'm in the process of getting my teaching degree, so working full time, going to college full time, and trying to make a living at this thing we call writing. So busy man.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Extreme. I mean, I'm pretty busy and I don't even have a job. Anyway, writing will keep you busy. That's what I'm trying to say. So what I wanted to talk about today, though, is, actually, first, Ian, what books have you got out there? We're going to do that part first, because you do write some stuff that has to do, that has a relationship with what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and pimp myself. So my first book, the psychological thriller, is The Draxler Program. It's about a con artist who unwittingly becomes part of a reality TV show, which we'll probably dive into more later. The other book I have out there is called The Land of Unlived Dreams. It is a middle grade fantasy about two kids who go to a magical world to save their father's dream.
Nice. Yes. I honestly, we're talking about thrillers today. That's just going to give away the subject, because, nothing is going to be normal today. But normal, that ship sailed as soon as you started listening to this podcast, folks. Normal is gone.
Pretty much, yeah.
So
normal's boring anyways.
My thoughts exactly. But of those two, obviously, The Land of Unlived Dreams is a place close to my heart as far as a reader. But the Draxler Program is kind of an interesting one to me, because, like you said, it's a psychological thriller. What's it? And I know thrillers, that's a little bit outside my wheelhouse in general, because I write, far-flung fantasy and science fiction, and mostly I don't really run with a thriller kind of vibe. And by that, I mean, I'm not writing super fast-paced books with it's not 24. The book doesn't take place in a single day. It's not that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I know your book isn't either in this case.
Yeah.
But what about it makes it a thriller, if you ask, if you had to narrow it down?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's probably one I should have thought through before we hopped on this call. But to me, it falls in the genre of a thriller, just due to the level of circumstance he has to get through. Everything is just in a time crunch, and there's a lot on the line. I mean, he's literally has his brain at stake. So for those of you who haven't read the book, basically when criminals in this world get convicted, at the end of their sentence, if their crime is serious enough, they get their brain washed. So Pete has a chance to avoid this fate if he wins this contest. So his efforts and everything he has to go through to survive the show, compared to the cost of it, gives that suspense and that thrill.
Okay, yeah. So it's really about the emotions, isn't it? That's kind of similar to. I think that goes for a lot of genres. Is the emotional play that happens in them is the most important thing. Like romance is about romantic vibes. Thriller is about thrilling vibes. It makes sense, right?
Exactly.
And horror is about, scary
horror vibes.
Things. Yeah, scary vibes. Anyway, let's stop using the word vibe. It all comes down to the vibes, and that's why we're going to stop saying vibe now.
Okay.
But I'm going to, starting now. But, geez. Anyway, so thrillers are themselves based around this kind of sense of suspense or you know, pressure, stakes. High stakes are generally a big part of them.
Mm-hmm.
And those stakes could be personal or they could be world level stakes, you know. Like, I don't know. I've read a bunch of Dan Brown books. I think those are generally classified as thrillers. And in one of them, I think it might have been I don't remember which order these were written in, but Digital Fortress.
Okay, that's one of the few ones I haven't read of his.
Okay, so Digital Fortress, it's an earlier Dan Brown. I think it's maybe his second or third book.
Okay.
And it's got a very similar, it's the only one that actually had a heavily techno element other than Angels and Demons that I read.
Okay.
And Angels and Demons doesn't really have heavy techno elements, just like, okay, we're going to make a special bomb to blow up in Vatican City. Spoilers. But anyway, the Digital Fortress, of course, focuses on like a code, basically, that can do something or other. It's been a few years since I read it. So to be fair, it's been quite a few years since I read it. But it is basically quite similar to the vibe. You know, it takes place, a lot of it takes place inside a government facility. So they're like, it's an NSA facility, I'm pretty sure. But then there's also somebody in Spain running around trying to solve the mystery there. And then they're in communication. And that's basically the story. But the key there is that what I meant to get at here is the stakes are very high for whatever reason. This code is, I think maybe it's a digital virus or something that's going to destroy the world's computers. I think that was actually it.
Okay.
It's going to lock everyone out of their computers or something, and therefore turn the world back, send the world back to the Stone Age. I'm pretty sure that was it.
Force everyone off of Facebook.
Yeah, one of those guys who didn't want Facebook to happen. You know, he could not put up with it. So. Geez. Anyway, got to avoid making any comments about Mark Zuckerberg now.
Okay.
Too late. Okay, so, geez, tangents they just abound. So, but in Digital Fortress, and I'm not a huge fan of Dan Brown. In fact, anyone who's listened to this show probably will have heard me complain about Dan Brown in the past. I'm not really a big fan of his, but that's not because he does the style of the thrill. It's not because he doesn't do a decent job with his thrillers. It's because I can't stand his writing style.
Yeah.
The actual plots are fine for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other interesting things I'm going to say about Dan Brown is that he actually ratchets up there's these two kind of elements that I personally see kind of at play in most thrillers, and that's the everyman element. You know, like there's this kind of normal person who's thrown into a crazy situation, and there's this, or somebody who's not fit for this situation. It's a very classic kind of idea of like, how is this guy going to get out of this mess? You know, the Da Vinci Code's a great example of that. And we'll go sticking with Dan Brown, because this guy is now he's a professor who's now on the run from the law, you know, or, you know, Angels and Demons, same professor up against this assassin who can kill people in the most absurd ways you can imagine. Anyway, point is, we got a pretty normal character with very high stakes, and that's that in one way or another. And that to me is kind of the base building block of a thriller. But I'm talking way too much. Do you agree with that or not?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that, and I think it's one of the reasons why we see elements of thrillers in so many other books. So I know before we hopped in there, we were talking about Dark Matter a lot, and although
by Blake
it's
Crouch,
by Blake Crouch, probably my favorite author at the moment. And although there is a high level of science in there, again, you have another normal man, actually a college professor yet again, and he's thrown into a world jumping situation. So yeah,
And the guy in Dark Matter is a particularly good example of this, because the character starts out as being almost completely normal. Like he's not a guy who's ever been good with a gun. He doesn't have a chiseled jaw, even not noted anyway. Not like the Robert Langdon character from the Da Vinci Code is actually way more of a superhero than the dude from Dark Matter. And that's one of the reasons I like Dark Matter so much better, honestly.
To be fair, I don't really remember what Robert Langdon is supposed to look like. Have you
ever seen a picture of Dan Brown? Sorry. Have you ever seen a picture of Dan Brown? He basically is described as looking like that.
So now Dan Brown is a superhero, is what you're saying?
No, but it's not. I shouldn't have mentioned the look, but it's like he's a swimmer. He's got he's got a lot of money because he's a published author, which is kind of a weird, ironic thing to say when Dan Brown just toiling in obscurity, at least while he was coming up with the character, relatively speaking. So whatever. You'd think the guy wouldn't, but anyway, point is, but he's also a nonfiction author too, right? He writes about symbols and stuff. He's a professor who's actually way more well known and successful than the guy from Dark Matter. That was my point.
Gotcha. Okay, I see what you're going at now.
He's got a lot better credentials, let's say, than some guy who's a mediocre professor who actually teaches students more than Paladins around the world saving people or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and it kind of helps because Dark Matter is a standalone book. And I've noticed a lot of thrillers, and this is actually kind of an interesting point, a lot of thrillers I've noticed are actually kind of standalone, or there's this element where you're not going to see that character again in the same way after the book. Dark Matter definitely falls into that category. And I have a feeling, I don't know, how does that relate to the Draxler program? I know you've had, there's been some issues with that in some ways, but so say what you feel comfortable saying.
So I think it all depends on kind of the plots of the book and the way it's just set up. So Blake Crouch is another example. He does have a thriller trilogy called the Wayward Pines trilogy, which is phenomenal as well. I definitely need to check it out. But with the Draxler program, I know a lot of people did want a sequel to it. But the way my story is cyclical in nature, it just felt like everything I would have done would undermine what took place in the Draxler program. And it just didn't feel like it was honoring the first book, which is why I chose to not make it a series. Now my dog's coming over here trying to give me a tennis ball. Okay.
Actually, that also reminds me, this is going to be a weird tangent, but what else is new? So there was a 1989 concept album by the band Queensryche.
Okay.
It's called Operation Mindcrime. I think it was 1989. Yeah, it's one of their classic albums, a power metal album, and it tells a story. It's a concept album, so it tells a story about this guy, but it's a cyclical album. So that's what you just reminded me of. It starts with the guy, and this isn't a big spoiler. The album takes an hour to listen to. It's well worth it. But it starts with the main character who's this weird. He's in a mental institution, being overly medicated, and in the end, you find out how he got there. Basically, you go through you flash back, and the final song is all about how he remembers everything every night. Basically, he remembers this horrible, tragic story that is his background every night. But the thing is, they actually made a sequel, like 15, 20 years later. They made a sequel to Operation Mindcrime. And it kind of ruined Operation Mindcrime if you take it as, an important part of the story to me. Anyway, it's like, because Operation Mindcrime, and so it's very much what you're describing here. That's why I'm bringing it up. Because it's this one thing. It's like, okay, the story's going to change. Like, this guy was completely destroyed at the end of Operation Mindcrime Part 1, and then Part 2 starts, and he's just like, now I'm out. I'm out of jail. I'm out of the insane asylum. I'm back on the streets. Like, what? How did that even happen? You were totally insane at the end of the first one. Anyway, so not saying that's the case in the Draxler program, but the insanity part, but the cyclical part, it's like, okay, we kind of know that it has to end this way, and this has to be an ending because the story becomes an Ouroboros, it becomes its own thing, and I think that's kind of cool in its own right.
Yeah,
and well worth keeping it that way. That's a little separate from thrillers, but there you go.
What also plays off of it is because of the nature of the story, and I'm thinking other thrillers might be this way too, is that when you write a sequel, you don't want to retell the same story over and over again. I know there are series like that. But because of the way the story is, it'd be literally everything happening the same way. I was like, no, I can't do that.
It's a rerun.
I could not put myself or the reader through that, so on to the next project.
Yeah, no, that seems like a very wise decision to me now. And it's interesting because, not to get too deep into but you mentioned, because you did actually you tried to start that book, right? You were like, okay, I'm going to do it. And it never really materialized because, and it's one of those things that as a writer, realizing what's not going to happen, that's a big, or what you really don't want to do can be really difficult. So I just want to, shout out to all the writers who are going through that.
We feel your pain.
Yes, I do that like every day. I'm like, oh, this was how the scene was supposed to go. Well, no, it's not going to happen that way. Well, that's fine. But it's the micro level of that. Like, okay, that scene's never going to happen. This scene happened instead. Here we go. Let's keep writing. Anyway. So as far as writing the Draxler program or any thriller, honestly, how would you approach I mean, we've talked a little about the protagonist, but how do you approach delivering that kind of tension level that's so important?
Yeah. So I think understanding pacing and not giving your characters everything they need right away, or just constantly taking stuff from them. Because I know as a writer, a lot of times our characters, like, I get a little connected to them. I want to make their lives easy, but you can't. So you have to find ways to delay what they want, and figure out how to push them through at a quick enough pace.
Yeah, and those two things together. Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so I think we might mention this in the last time I was on the pod, that you actually helped me with the brainstorm of the Draxler program. And one of the things that I got out of that brainstorm was one of the side quests that they needed to do was remove this vagus nerve implants, which was it was just used to kind of control them. So it gave them the task. It gave me something that I could keep delaying, keep pushing off in a natural way. And I could find different cliffhangers to put in between each chapter. So knowing what the issue is, and finding different ways to basically just fuck them over again and again.
Yeah, I mean, just knowing the end point of any part of your story, like, it doesn't have to be in the end of the whole book, but the end of, like, okay, this is how that arc has to end, is them getting this nerve implant out. Or this arc has to end with the main character realizing he's a meaningless mote in the existence of the universe, like one of my short stories ended. I mean, it was a very depressing ending, mind you, but there you go. But that was a story. I mean, I just thought of that story because that was how I felt. I was like, I'm actually just throwing this. I'm just kicking the can down the road until we get to until there's been enough time covered and the stakes are high enough that, okay, now I can destroy this guy and it's going to feel good. I mean, not good per se, because that's not how that story worked. But, you get the idea.
Yeah.
It'll feel right. It'll be the right ending. And actually, I think that's one of those things I noticed as writing epic fantasy. It's kind of similar. It's just that you do different things, and that's the thing that goes to most genres. Is you doing kind of the same trick. You're kicking the can down the road. That's a bad analogy. You're moving the story forward. You're progressing things in one way or another. You're taking more stuff away from the character in the thriller as you make the stakes higher, basically.
Yeah.
So their situation becomes just that much more dire, right?
Yes.
Like in Dark Matter, actually, was great. I mean, this isn't a big spoiler for Dark Matter, but there's a large. I keep thinking about this. There's actually a fair amount of times in that book that his bank account, not his bank account because he doesn't have a bank account, but the amount of money he has mentioned, like how much money he has left after doing this and this and this, and that's really interesting because actually that is kind of that's kind of a show of how destitute he is because he's usually pretty poor. He's not exactly flush through the course of that book, and because that book takes place over a relatively long period of time, it does actually add to the tension of, okay, this guy, at least for a thriller, I consider that book to be more of a long-term thriller in some ways.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, he's getting worn out, and eventually, there's no money left, and then what happens? Yeah, anyway, that was kind of, that's where my mind goes when you say, like, yeah, take stuff away from them. Their resources, their friends, all that stuff. It's anyway. So as far as that goes, have you ever read a thriller that had like a powerhouse protagonist? It's like, okay, he's not even Robert Langdon here. He's not the guy from Dark Matter. He's somebody who's actually really good at what they do. And that is actually kind of the main gist of the story too. Like that's what they're trying to do.
Oh, that is a great question.
I mean, if anything comes to mind, yeah.
Notebooks are coming to mind, but when you say what came to mind first was actually the Bourne Identity trilogy. I know we talked about this on Wednesday. In
one of the non-podcasts, the ones that no one gets to listen to.
Exactly. Our private chats. But yeah, because he's so good at stuff, sorry, got distracted. Moving to the side of me.
No, that's cool. That's cool. But so Jason Bourne in the Bourne Identity.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Totally got sidetracked there mentally.
Okay, so but I see what you mean by Bourne though, right? Like Bourne is he's a superhero in those movies. He's like he can outfight just about anybody. He's a great driver. He is a great sneaker.
And even when he doesn't remember how to do stuff, he's just amazing at it.
Yeah, no, that's a great example actually, and that is very much a thriller type movie, series of movies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a perfect example actually. I've heard those books. He's much more of an everyman in the original books, which is interesting. That he's actually way more. He's just the guy who's good at disappearing. He's not necessarily the guy who's a nasty guy. He can't kill people with a paper towel or whatever.
Well, maybe that's not him. Maybe that's just Matt Damon. Matt Damon just secretly all powerful.
He just couldn't take it down a notch to play that part.
Exactly. It's like, no, I go all out all the time.
That was like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. They thought like that's where they got the idea for the bullet time. Anyway, sorry. Okay, this show's gone a lot of different places, but I'm thank you for being on the show, Ian. It's been fun.
Yeah, anytime, man.
So, what have you been reading lately?
So
if you had time, obviously you're busy.
Yeah, because of my schedule, I don't have a ton of time to read. Mostly what I'm doing is listen to audiobooks on my way to and from work. So actually, I just started the second book in the Gentleman Bastards series by Scott Lynch. So Red Seas Under Red Skies.
Okay, yeah, I've been meaning to get into that series.
Yeah, before that, I was listening to Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. So my rare bit of nonfiction, which maybe I listen to like one book of nonfiction a year. And because I'm doing some YA stuff right now, YA sci-fi, I've been trying to get into more books in that genre. So I've listened to like These Broken Stars by Amy Kaufman and her other book, Aurora Rising. So those are like just the last few books I've been listening to.
Oh, it's great. It's a great set of recommendations. And actually, as for me, I've got a couple books that I've been reading lately. I've been reading a few nonfiction books about writing, but we're not going to recommend those because those are a little more narrow, perhaps, than people actually need. I believe I was reading, though actually I will say, I've been reading Craig Martell's Writing to Release or something. Releases or launches. I forget the title. That's why I was
like release strategies?
Yeah, launch strategies, I believe is the name of the book.
Okay.
It's either launch strategies or release strategies. I'm sorry, Craig. I forgot. But it's pretty solid, actually. There's a lot of information in there that's a lot different on the business side than other writer books that I've read.
Okay.
And it actually deals more with the numbers of like, okay, that's really heartening. The first month is generally a dry month, basically. Like you don't make a lot of money in your first month in a series, right? That's useful to know. But anyway. The other book I read actually was another independent novel. It was by Michael Anderle. That was Death Becomes Her. I finished reading that one. Oh,
how was that? I've heard a lot of good things about it.
Well, it's okay. I'm not gonna. It is the guy's first novel, and it's okay. I wasn't actually super thrilled with it, but I did finish reading it, so I figured I'd give it the old plug here because I enjoyed a lot of it.
You know, for any debut novel, saying it's okay is better than most.
It's indeed it is, and I mean, Michael's been on the show. He's a great guy. But everyone needs to learn how to write better as they go. And when you write your first book and you release it, you take some limitations with that, right?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, not gonna go into any more details about that. It's a little bit awkward. I probably should not have mentioned it at all. But there you go. It's an interesting book, and the premise itself is quite interesting. And it actually is kind of a thriller premise, though the book doesn't really go that direction.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's kind of a thriller or urban fantasy kind of premise to start with, where it's like, okay, this like hot shot agent. I think I'm actually not positive what her actual job was, but she was some kind of. She's the main character is this like hot shot agent who has been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And then she becomes a vampire. That's not a spoiler. That's basically the premise of the whole book. So, yeah. And then there's an enormous series that follows, and I may not be proceeding with that. It's a little It's a little early to tell.
Okay.
There are 20 more books at least in that series.
Ooh, so that is a very big
I
series.
said it was enormous. It is enormous. There's actually 21, and there's another series that follows from it. There's 21
Okay,
total books.
that checks out. Yes, that is enormous.
Yeah, so that's that. I mean, I'm definitely not criticizing the length of Mike Landerly's series if he puts us all to shame. So there you go. And even Brandon Sanderson he doesn't have to have any spines in his closet. That sounded weird. Why did I just say that? Okay, anyway. Okay, so thanks a lot for listening, folks. Ian, tell us more where you can find your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything, all my books can be found on Amazon. You can check out my website, iqmalcolm.com, or follow me on social media. Most active on Facebook and Instagram, so just search IQ Malcolm. And feel free to reach out to me. I always love getting in contact with people.
All right. And as for me, there's always mentalcellarpublications.com where you can find all the work and the books and stuff. But also, you can definitely check out my Amazon author page. I forget the URL for that, but it's search Tim Niederreiter on Amazon. You'll find me. And I have a number of books out still. There's no books that are free anymore, actually, folks. That ship sailed as well. I keep using that analogy while we're done with it. This is the last time you'll hear it in this episode because the episode's almost over.
Okay, you stopped saying vibes, though, so there's that.
Don't make me say it again. So, so as for that, the books I've got out, the series I have are the Rain Protocol series that starts with the Mangrove Suite. Then there's the Pillar Universe series that starts with Stormfleet. And I have Demon Scroll is out, and then on November 22nd, yes, I had to push the pre-order back, so apologies to everyone who has a pre-order. The next book in the Demon Hunter series, which is Epic Fantasy, and that's entitled Shadow Prince, is coming out November 22nd, 2019. So go check that out if you're listening to this time warped. And thanks for listening, everybody. Take it easy. And talk to you next week.
That tears it.